in radio, you obviously you have to like edit your own, especially if you're a reporter like me. I have to edit my own audio a lot, right? So I'm very familiar with the weird sounds my mouth makes. And
okay, mouth noises are different than breath noises. Mouth noises are like. Is that bothering you?
That's so bad. I can't stand that. There's also some people just have wet mouths. I hate that too. I keep my mouth very dry.
What does that mean?
We've all heard somebody who just has kind of their mouth is lubricated. Their gums are rubbing up against their lips while they talk or whatever.
Gee, look at the time. It's time for Sound Politics.
Welcome to Sound Politics. I'm Scott Greenstone.
And I'm Libby Dankman.
And we are officially a year old. So today on Sound Politics, imagine you're at an awkward party for your friend's 1-year-old kid.
It's the best. I mean, it's the kind where you haven't seen your friend in a long time.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
they
One of
had a
those.
child and you're wondering what next.
Yeah, right. Oh, what do we talk about anymore? The news, we'll talk about that. The weather, maybe. Did you vote in the primary? Because that's important. Do we have anything in common anymore?
I am really excited about the part where we all throw a tantrum and take a nap. And of course, open presents. And by that,
Yes.
I mean answer a Sound Politics listener question.
Yes. So let's get going. Let's get this party started.
Heck yeah.
First up, we're heading to the polls in the sense that there is a primary coming up on Tuesday, right? So get your ballots in by 8 p.m. And also the sense that we have got some polls to talk about, Libby.
Yeah, some interesting numbers coming out of these polls, both for state level leaders and for the city level in Seattle.
Yeah, and the first one is not about the election. The first one is just a job approval rating. How is Governor Ferguson doing as governor of Washington? So this is an Elway poll. Registered voters were given an option to rank the governor's job performance as poor, fair, good, or excellent. And less than a third of voters rated his performance good or excellent. That's not good. That's a lower job rating than any governor in their first 6 months since Mike Lowry, who I definitely know who that is.
Yeah, I didn't just Google his New York Times obituary. And I just want to pull a graph from that just really quickly to kind of express where Mike Lowry was in his first term as governor.
In 1993.
Yeah, 1993, Mr. Lowry decided not to seek re-election after a single 4-year term. His political stock, already low after a 93 tax increase, put a button, underline that, plummeted when his deputy press secretary, Suzanne Albright, accused him of sexually harassing her and using crude and offensive language. So that's the bar. And now Governor Ferguson today is around that level of approval rating.
Yeah. So not great. Every governor since has had a better approval rating in the first 6 months. I just want to note before I move on that Mike Lowry is, I Googled Mike Lowry and found that it's also the name of Will Smith's character in Bad Boys. So there's that. Okay, so
Important
this is
stuff.
really an awkward party. I wanted to get your thoughts on why the rating is so bad. I just want to point out, again, 8 points lower than Jay Inslee's first 6-month rating, 11 points lower than Christine Gregoire, 20 points lower than Gary Locke. Remember Gary? We had him on the show recently. So
Gary was really, people were liking him.
They loved him.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you think is happening with Governor Ferguson? Why is he unpopular as a guy who raised taxes and potentially groped his press secretary?
Well, Scott, it's a tough time to have your approval ratings polled when it's within a week of gas taxes going up by 6 cents, which happened at the beginning of July. This poll was conducted July 7th through 11th. So folks are looking at their gas prices, the cost of the tank, and thinking, who do I blame for this? Maybe it's Bob Ferguson. And just overall, the perception that he talked tough on taxes, talked tough on asking the legislature to go back and find more cuts, to be more fiscally responsible, got Republicans' hopes up. Republicans were like, buying bouquets and throwing flowers at his feet for a little bit there. And then the perception, again, is that he made a turn there, maybe flip-flopped, and signed a budget with the biggest tax increase in state history, big increase in the things that the sales tax applies to, the B&O tax, things like that. And when you look at this Elway poll, Ferguson's number one issue that voters know him for and approve of him for is, quote, fights with Trump. Yeah. Right? I mean, you remember, how many times did the governor, then AG, sue the Trump administration?
That was his number one pitch kind of last year, is I'll protect you if Trump gets reelected. And then Trump got reelected.
Yeah. I mean, so 19% of voters in this poll cited that for the reason for their rating. Now, how is that fight going?
Yeah.
I mean, the Trump administration is on a roll in a lot of ways. They are deregulating. They are cracking down on immigration. They are doing all kinds of things that are making lefties in Washington upset. Now, the Attorney General Nick Brown here in Washington State is still fighting. The governor here, Governor Ferguson, is still fighting. But it doesn't feel like the momentum is on the side of the resistance, right, in this point in the Trump administration.
And I do just want to point out that a lot of those political promises during his campaign were a little bit false, because you can't really fight Trump hard as the governor in the way that you can as the attorney general. So in some ways, there's not a lot he can do.
And so you're not really in the ring in the same way.
That's right.
I was talking to Jay Inslee earlier this week, former governor, well known as a climate warrior. And he was on my other show, Soundside, to talk about these changes at the EPA to basically abdicate the EPA's role in fighting climate change. And I thought about that thinking, this is the thing everybody knows Jay Inslee for. They had like an issue area specifically that they could say, I believe in, clean energy and changing our economy to support that. And I believe in what Jay Inslee stands for. I think Governor Ferguson, he did make really strong stands as AG on women's reproductive rights and other fights with the Trump administration. But he doesn't have that signature issue that Inslee had that voters can really kind of wrap their minds around. The other thing is you got to look at the overall Democratic Party as things are more nationalized these days. The approval rating for Democrats is at a 30-year low. When you look and see that those numbers really closely mirror the Ferguson approval numbers, 32% of voters would rate Ferguson's first 6 months as excellent or good. The Wall Street Journal poll that is getting all this attention about the Democratic Party shows 33% net approval for Democrats. That is really closely aligned, and I just wonder how much the brand itself is suffering and governors who are associated with that brand are suffering.
You're saying Ferguson is unpopular because Democrats are unpopular.
Yeah, I think so. That could be one of the. These are not like one reason things, right?
And this poll is not super clear on a lot of people dislike him for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, to a lesser degree, I was looking at those crime numbers, which are a good story for Ferguson to tell. Washington State's Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs say that, violent crime is trending downwards, dropped in 2024 compared with 2023. Now, he wasn't governor in 2024, but we're looking at trends. However, there's like a sliver of question in my mind about the drug crimes. That was the one thing. So murders, violent crimes, all sorts of things are down.
Yeah.
But drug crimes are up a little bit. They don't track street disorder in the FBI numbers that the Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs are citing here. And to me, if you are living at least in a big city in Washington State right now, you're still seeing a lot of street disorder. And, people may associate that with, the leadership of the state.
And I want to talk about that in relation to the city leadership, too. And we will in a minute here. But before we move on from Ferguson, I want to mention a former aide that has gotten him into, or he has gotten himself into, some hot water in the last week.
Mike Webb.
Yeah, that's right. That's basically Ferguson's right-hand man, a longtime friend and advisor. Mike Webb resigned as chief strategy officer in March for the governor. He was in the governor's office, but he resigned over allegations, very kind of vague allegations. He had created a hostile workplace environment for some women in the office. We mentioned this at the time. He denied the allegations, but said he'd step aside so as not to create a distraction. And at that time, this is how close Mike is to Governor Ferguson. Ferguson said, in a statement, I wouldn't be governor without Mike. This is coming up. Their closeness is coming up again because last week, Governor Ferguson apologized to staff because it turns out Mike rode with him on a state plane to the Tri-Cities. So there was this Zoom call where people were upset. Apparently, Ferguson apologized to his staff. He was surreptitiously recorded, and the audio.
Do you think that that's a bad sign for the governor, that his staff is secretly running a voice memo during a Zoom call and passing that on to Jim Brunner at the Seattle Times?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, Jim Brunner got it. Yeah, might be a bad. It just doesn't seem like it's a great time at the governor's office right now. Maybe hasn't been for a little bit. But yeah, I want to mention that. I don't think that's certainly not the cause of any of these numbers, but not a good week for Ferguson news.
Yeah, rough week. I do want to zero in on a quote that Brunner published from Mike Webb in the coverage of this flight to the Tri-Cities. So here we go. Webb said he sat during the short June 26th flight from Boeing Field to the Tri-Cities on a seat over the plane's toilet. Quote, the people on the flight, I have worked with all of them, Webb said. They are all friends. He said he got hugs from everyone and no one told him they were uncomfortable. Respectfully, if you are still in a position of power with your boss, and it appears that you are, if Mike Webb is flying on the plane, going to meetings with Governor Ferguson, I don't think the average person in that office is going to tell you if they feel uncomfortable.
And that's even if that seat of power is, a seat over the state plane toilet.
I hate it when I sit by the bathroom on a flight. It's the worst.
Have you tried in the bathroom?
No, I have not. Okay, to close this out on Ferguson, just circling back to the national picture on Democrats, not everything is doom and gloom. There was a Gallup poll just published earlier today that showed the Democrats have taken back the advantage in party affiliation over Republicans for the first time in a couple of years. So even with super negative approval ratings for the party overall, Democrats are getting the typical registration and affiliation bump in that first part of an opposition president's term that usually happens. Like the pendulum swings, people start to get frustrated with the guy in power.
Yeah.
And similarly, I feel like Ferguson numbers right now, it's one poll, right?
Right.
It's a
That's
single
so
poll. And although people might be venting frustrations, I don't know that it's time for the Ferguson team to say this is big warning signs overall.
Yeah. And before we move on, there is one other poll that I want to ask you about, Libby. It involves the mayor of Seattle, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say about it. I'm not going to talk about it at all because my girlfriend works for the mayor of Seattle, and I don't cover that race and try not to talk about it whenever possible. So tell me about this poll in the mayor's race that came out just a few days ago.
Yeah, this is from the Northwest Progressive Institute. It's the Change Research poll from last week. They polled voters July 23rd through the 25th. Mm-hmm. And Katie Wilson, the head of the Transit Riders Union, is making a race out of this with incumbent Bruce Harrell. They are within the margin of error. Some may say neck and neck. But when asked about two candidates in the race between Harrell and Wilson in this poll, Katie Wilson comes out with 40% versus Bruce Harrell's 37%. 24% are undecided. After reading the voters' pamphlet, Katie Wilson's advantage goes up just a little bit. Again, it's still really within the margin of error. However, I want to circle back to the fact that when voters were first asked about all 8 candidates, almost 40% said that they were undecided at this point. Yeah. Now, that can indicate that this might break either way, right? When ultimately people are going to the polls. At the same time, I wonder where Bruce Harrell's incumbency advantage is. This isn't a wide open race. This is a sitting mayor who you'd assume that there aren't 40% of likely voters who don't know who Bruce Harrell is or are not familiar with him at some level. Katie Wilson is making the case that this is an urgent time, that there needs to be a change in the mayor's office. However, Harrell can say crime is down, visible homelessness down. Wilson would come back and say the rent's too damn high, plenty of disorder, visible human suffering, all that stuff. Yeah, it's an interesting snapshot. At the same time, our editor Kat pointed out, Bruce Harrell has underperformed in primary elections before. He finished in 2021 on primary night, less than 2 points ahead of Lorena Gonzalez, but then went on to beat her in the general by 17 points. So we'll see. And Ann Davison, the city attorney's race, the polling coming out with her supported about 33% in this NPI poll. And Erica Evans, the more progressive former prosecutor under Pete Holmes, really emerging as the top challenger there.
Yeah, far behind.
Yeah, Ann Davison is far behind Erica Evans, yeah. So the city attorney and Seattle mayor's race, that's just one set of local elections coming up this week. A reminder, ballots for the primary are due Tuesday, August 5th. Now, we also have talked about democracy vouchers. We've talked about some of these races here on this podcast, so you can go back to prior episodes for those. But that's all pretty Seattle-focused, yeah. Scott. So you've been following some other races in cities close by, our neighbors to the north and south. Yeah. What are you looking at?
Yeah. Just a reminder, if you are in South King County on the east side, over in the Gig Harbor, Bremerton, Port Orchard area, you have some legislative primaries coming up. We have talked about that on some of those on our Democratic Dominoes episode from a month or two ago. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, 2 cities other than Seattle have mayoral election. Well, several do, but there's 2 that I'm looking at pretty closely. First one is Everett. The mayor of Everett, Cassie Franklin, is kind of a mystery to me. She ran a youth homelessness nonprofit and then ran for mayor. And after she sailed to re-election in 2021, she has gotten this rep as really tough on homelessness. She passed and then expanded a ban on sitting or lying down within 10 blocks of city shelters and behavioral health and drug treatment facilities that even disallowed passersby in those zones from giving homeless people food and water. And
wow, that sounds a lot more punitive than you'd expect from a former leader of a nonprofit.
Yeah, so those strict measures or whatever Everett's doing on homelessness does not seem to have worked, at least from the numbers. Since Franklin first took office in 2018, I was looking at the counts of homelessness. They have nearly doubled in the city of Everett. So she has drawn 2 real challengers, I think. Former Everett council member Scott Murphy, he has raised nearly as much as she has. The other one has not, but former Snohomish County NAACP chair Janice Green has snagged endorsements from local Democratic grassroots groups and some state lawmakers. And I should not, say that Franklin is in trouble, because she will not be easy to beat. She does boast endorsements from a wide swath of prominent Democrats in Congress, moderates, even conservatives.
Okay, so you are going to be watching that Everett race, and then let's turn to the south as well, to a place that decidedly does not have an aroma anymore. Please stop asking.
Yes.
Tacoma also has city elections coming up, Scott. What are you looking for there?
Tacoma aroma, we don't know her. But the mayor and council races, we do know. There's going to be, Tacoma politics are fascinating. There's a big change in leadership underway this year. 4 out of the 8 city council seats are up for re-election. The city manager is retiring. They have a council manager system of government. I'm not going to get into it. I am a nerd and would love to, but I won't. Mayor Victoria Woodards is term limited out of running again, so she's not running. There are 2 Democrats that are probably going to win the mayoral primary and advance to November when I look at donations and endorsements. But what I think is really interesting about Tacoma is that by some metrics, it has swung further to the left than Seattle in recent years. You've got folks like Black Lives Matter activist Jamika Scott, who won a seat on city council a few years ago. There is citywide legislation like the Tenants' Bill of Rights, which regulated landlords, that passed citywide by a very thin margin. That makes for some interesting council races in places like District 5, which is the southernmost district in Tacoma. In that race, Democratic Socialists of America organizer Zev Cook, who helped pass that Tenants' Bill of Rights, is running against and outraising the incumbent Democrat, Joe Bushnell, who was endorsed by the Black Lives Matter activist, Jamika Scott. So you have different kinds of progressives or leftists running against each other.
Yeah, the thing I have thought about over the years interviewing Mayor Victoria Woodards is that she was really interested in sort of trying out progressive solutions. She did collaborate with that guaranteed income pilot program that gave $500 a month to certain people in a study that had encouraging outcomes there in Tacoma. So end of an era with her kind of passing the baton, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in Tacoma. We are going to take a quick break. Stick with us. When we come back, we're going to answer a listener question, open up a little present for our 1-year birthday. See you back here in just a minute.
Okay, we are back. And one of the things I wanted to do to celebrate our 1-year anniversary is
Happy birthday, Sound Politics.
Open up a little present. Well, for a listener, actually, answer a listener question. I think of answering a listener question as giving them a little present.
It's a little arrogant, but okay.
I mean, we're doing a whole segment on how we just turned 1 year old.
Yeah, good for us. Big pat on the back. 1 year.
Big time for arrogance. I really just wanted to get to a question we haven't had time to answer yet from the last year. This one is from Rich. Rich says, I know the last time Washington tried to go for a high earners income tax, it didn't go so well. But with Governor Ferguson's stance on wealth taxes, is it time to try again to amend the Constitution? Is anyone polling on or studying what it would take to get voters to agree to an income tax? Like, could we go Oregon's route and drop the sales taxes and or other taxes, even if we did a gradual swap or something? And, it's dawning on me this is not much of a gift because, Rich, the answer is
Be
no.
prepared for disappointment.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you for the question, though.
I emailed the pollster we were talking about at the beginning of the episode who did the Governor Ferguson poll, Stuart Elway. He said, I haven't done any such research, not heard of any. I did some years ago, like decades ago. With the kinds of questions Richard suggests, a state income tax was a hard no-go. I haven't seen any polling since. Wah, wah. And so, just in case, I checked with the executive director of Invest in Washington Now, which is an advocacy group trying to get higher taxes passed. She also basically said, no recent proposals on an income tax from legislators. But other proposals like the high earners payroll tax and the wealth tax continue to gain traction. So, sorry, Rich, here's your gift. No.
Big lump of coal.
I feel like this is our version of Alaska's permanent fund dividend, right? So that's like a quasi universal basic income sort of socialist thing that Alaskans love and will never get rid of.
Yeah, the money from the oil revenue in Alaska.
Exactly. Yeah. That everyone gets. Everyone's a resident that is, eligible.
A yearly check.
Right. It's like the inverse of that. It's like our yearly lack of a check, lack of an income tax, even though we are a liberal state. It doesn't really jive with our politics anymore, but we're too attached to it. You think that's true?
Everybody, has heard this a million times at this point, but the regressive nature of our tax code definitely doesn't seem to align with our progressive politics. I do think the amendment to the state's constitution would need a 2/3 majority in both houses, the House and the Senate and the legislature. Then a majority of voters would have to approve it. That bar is pretty high, and sinking a lot of resources into trying to clear it and then defending it in court, which would be inevitably challenged immediately. That's probably not something progressives are super interested in. And so, one thing I was thinking about was the proposal over this past session, which ended up dying, but would have allowed counties and municipalities to raise property taxes by more than 1%. That's an area that I think has really hurt local budgets to a degree that is becoming more and more acute. That might come back again. The other thing is that, if a capital gains tax, like what Washington does, can squeak by the state Supreme Court and overcome the ban on an income tax in the state constitution, progressives are also going to start looking at more of that. So the wealth tax that Rich mentioned, but also the statewide version of the jumpstart tax, which was something that came up again in this session, didn't get through.
That's the payroll tax on big employers.
Yeah. So, this big goal overall to get an income tax, which we are one of only a half a dozen, maybe six or seven states in the country that don't have an income tax. It's probably too big of a lift for progressives, but they can eat away at the edges in these different ways, and that's more likely.
Taxes have been such a big conversation over the last year. Taxes are such a key part of what the Democratic Party has to decide on moving forward about its own, identity and its stances. A lot of disagreement. I'm thinking about this, all of this last year so much right now because we turned one.
You're in a reflective mood.
I am. We launched a year ago, probably at the end of the most insane month, or at least the top 5 most insane months in American history. And despite everything that has happened on the national level, we have tried to keep the focus local. Sometimes we succeeded. I think, I wanted to bring
The Trump
in...
magnet is really strong. When
Yes.
you're doing a political podcast, it's very difficult to keep the focus local because so much of what he's doing
Is
at the national
affecting
stage
us.
is affecting us and
Yes.
is affecting the mood and how people are feeling. Yeah.
And I think at times I've struggled to see the forest for the trees. So when that happens, like every good reporter, I talk to my editor, and that's who we have
Suck
here.
up, brown noser.
So Kat Smith is here, has
Hello.
joined the party. Sound Politics editor Kat Smith, you
Yay.
took
Hi, Kat.
Hi.
Hi.
You took a spin through some old episodes, and I want you to tell us what your takeaways have been from this year, because we're too close.
Give us something interesting and smart, Kat, because I got nothing. I have memory hold everything.
Yeah. Okay. So, thinking that you guys might have memory hold everything, I did scroll back through all of our episodes and I listened to some of them. And the
Wow.
earlier ones are hilarious.
Homework? What?
There's like 50 of them, first of all. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but we did launch the show when the lime green brat meme reigned supreme online.
That was our first Brat. What was our first episode? It was like Brat Summer's over.
Brat
the
Summer's over.
Washington governor's race this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, Charlie XCX had declared that Kamala is brat. Kamala
Right.
had just decided she was going to run for president.
Wow.
And then very soon after that meme blew up, then Charlie said, Brat is dead.
Did you listen? Did you re-listen to Brat?
Did we kill Brat?
I don't know if we killed Brat, but I did. We played like clips from that album on that
Yeah.
episode, and I hadn't listened to that album in like 8 months. So I went home and listened to a bunch of it last night, and it still slaps.
Still hits.
holds up.
Oh my
Still
god,
hits.
it's so
Oh, yeah.
good.
Nice.
I never stopped listening to it, just for the
Sound
record.
Politics tried to kill Brat, but Brat lives.
Yeah, Brat is stronger than Sound Politics. But early on, so we were, in the midst of all that, we were trying to cover a governor's race at the time when the presidential race was sucking all the air out of the room. And that race started to bleed into our governor's race when some of Republican candidate Dave Reichert's anti-abortion and pro-Trump statements started to leak out to the press. But we tried to keep the show's focus on local stuff as much as we could. Like, we did a whole episode on why our ballots are so big and packed with levies and
Yes.
candidates sometimes, and what were the laws that Republicans were trying to overturn with that slate of initiatives last year. And then in November, we learned that as the rest of the country took this dramatic shift to the right in the presidential election, Washington state moved rightward less than the rest of the pack.
Yeah.
And, now the show has sort of turned its attention to messy budgets of state and local governments. Everyone's broke, and how our new Democratic Governor Bob Ferguson is kind of making everybody angry in his first term, Democrats and Republicans alike. He's not
Yeah.
polling very well. So my takeaway after scrolling through all of these episodes and listening to some of them, my takeaway about Washington politics is this.
Ooh.
We used this headline last November that when America zigs, Washington zags. We're a weird state.
Yeah.
Geographically, we're far away from the other Washington on the East Coast. We're turning into this little blue oasis in an increasingly right-shifting America. So we might seem like this strange outlier barnacled onto the continental United States, but actually, what I think our state is more of a mirror for the national mood, even if it's more of like a funhouse mirror.
Ooh.
I think we have the same urban-rural divide that splits the rest of America. We're struggling with spiraling cost of living issues and rising homelessness. We're having to grapple with decades of public policy that got us to where we are today. And in Washington state, that policy has been guided largely by Democrats in recent years. So I sense this kind of growing populist verve in our state, this backlash to well-intentioned progressive policies and Democrats in office. The strain of populism here, it looks a little bit different than populism looks on the national stage, but I kind of sense that something like that is happening here too.
That's interesting.
So that's my takeaway after a year.
Wow. And what a year it's been. I look at Washington certainly as like sort of a staging ground behind, friendly lines, right? Again, it's a pretty safe democratic place. We do. I love the funhouse mirror metaphor that you used, because I think we did sort of think, oh, Washington could be a mirror for the country. Could we look at Clallam County to,
the bellwether county,
right? In which it did not predict. Kamala won that county, and of course did not win America.
Same with Washington's primary. It had been used as kind of a bellwether with a lot of math involved for national politics, and that precedent fell too.
Yeah, and despite all that, I think what Democrats are struggling with, because I mean Washington State again is run by Democrats, is a Democrat stronghold. I think they're looking at this state and saying, is this a model? Do we get more progressive? Do we tax the rich more, or do these other things? Or is it just what you said, a barnacle being carried along on a right-facing ship? And I that's my takeaway, or at least my question for year two is like, what are Democrats going to take from here and take to their national platform?
I have no big insight into Washington State and its place in national politics, but I do have a little bit of insight into our listenership, because I actually ran into somebody at the Paramount this week when I was out at a show, and they heard me over, a couple seat rows introduce myself. So apparently my voice is too loud. And they stopped me at intermission, and they said that they really like Sound Politics. And it's one of those things where getting a chance to meet people in person, getting a chance to say hello. And the number one takeaway that this listener said was, we need more local news. And so I'm just really happy to have worked with you, Scott, over the past year. And I'm excited for more. And Kat as well. Like, we need more local news. And, we're like a little weirdo, sometimes ridiculous part of it.
I love that. We'll continue to be that. Now's the appropriate time to pop the champagne.
And that's it for Sound Politics today. Our show is produced by Hans Anderson. Our editor is Catherine Smith. And I'm Libby Denkman.
And I'm Scott Greenstone. And this show is only possible for the whole year we've been here, for the whole many years we'll be here in the future, because of your support. I'd like to specifically thank Matthew, who donated this week.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you so much. Please consider joining Matthew to keep us going at KUOW.org/politics. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.